Hello and welcome to Reading the Gospels Together. And today we're in chapter 14 of the Gospel of John, one of the most familiar passages in all the Bible, and in some ways, one of the most misunderstood. There's a translation difficulty that we've inherited from the King James Bible, which gives us a wrong impression of something very important that Jesus is saying. The good news is what Jesus actually says is even better. Let's take a look. Chapter 14 begins with, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God. Believe also in me." Now that's a wonderful verse which becomes even more wonderful when we keep it within its context. Jesus and the disciples have gathered for the Last Supper. While John doesn't include the supper scene itself, he talked about it way back in chapter 6 in connection with the feeding of the 5,000. And John's determination to do this, for reasons we discussed back in chapter 6, can be a bit confusing for us because we expect it to happen here. But remember, John's community for which this gospel is written had the others already in hand. They knew the Last Supper story very well. What John does include for us is a lot of surrounding material from that night, which the other gospels don't have, such as the foot washing scene and the lengthy speeches Jesus gives in chapters 14 through 17. Remember, John wrote his gospel with the intention of supplementing what wasn't in the other ones. And that's what he's doing here. Now, so again, let's come back to our key verse. "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. You believe in God. Believe also in me." Now, the context. Remember that Jesus had just made it very clear that he was facing arrest and crucifixion, that one of their number would betray him, and that Peter, his dear friend Peter, would deny him before the night was through. Perhaps even more distressing, he's just told them that he's going where they cannot follow. And it's within this context that he says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me." It's in the face of great personal distress for his own situation and in the face of increasing panic on behalf of the disciples that these words are spoken. Now further, when Jesus says believe, he means more than belief in his existence. Obviously, the disciples already believed that Jesus exists. Believe in this context means to have faith in and to trust. He's saying, there's a terrible time ahead. You won't have me here with you, but you must trust God. You must trust me. We will be together again. This is not a pie in the sky pleasant thought. This is a life preserver to drowning people. This is an anchor to hold on to in the face of the storm. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In times of great personal crisis and distress, we can cling to that verse as well. But now the verse so misunderstood by us. As the King James puts it, "In my Father's house are many mansions." Now the first solo I ever played in church on my trumpet was the old spiritual, "I've got a mansion just over the hilltop." And the lyrics go, "I'm satisfied with a cottage below, a little silver and a little gold. But in that city where the ransomed will shine, I want a gold one that's silver lined." Now, I've got him, and then it goes, "I've got a mansion just over the hilltop." Now, that's a fun song, but again, it's a poor translation. But it isn't the translation from the Greek, which the King James people got wrong. It's our translation from King James English, which we don't speak anymore, to modern English, which we do. Words are used in completely different ways then as they are now. For instance, hundreds of years ago, mansion meant room or dwelling place. It's derived from the Latin word mansio, which means the place where someone stays. Today, it means huge house, big pillars, swimming pools, lots of luxury. That's not what Jesus meant at all. What Jesus meant was something much better. What Jesus is saying is, we're being invited into the main house, the Father's house. We're being given a room there. In other words, we are being welcomed into the family. That's where we're staying. That's where we belong. We're being welcomed in to the family compound. Now, in the original language in which John was written, the literal translation is, "In my Father's family estate are many rooms, and one of them has your name on it. That's where I live with my Father. That's where you'll be living too. I'll bring you there myself. Welcome to the family. Welcome home." We're not in a separate mansion just over the hilltop somewhere. We won't be where God isn't. We will be living in the very house, which is to say, we'll be living in the very presence of God, as members of the family, as children of God. And that's better than any mansion. Now, how do we get there, asks Thomas. And Jesus says, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." Jesus has already described himself earlier in the gospel as the door, as the doorkeeper, and as the shepherd. It's the shepherd which leads the sheep safely to the sheepfold. They must go through the door to enter, and it's the gatekeeper who opens the door, recognizes the sheep, and allows them to come in. Jesus presents himself as guide, gate, and doorman into the presence of God, into the Father's house. Not only that, he also pays the price for us to enter. And that's what's coming next in the Gospels. And of course, it's a terrible price to pay. Finally, Jesus makes it clear that he's the very representation of God. To know Jesus is to know God. To see Jesus is to see God. As he says, "I am in the Father and the Father is in me." The Father and the Son are inseparable. And in the next section, John chapter 14, verses 15 through 31, Jesus will promise the Holy Spirit to the disciples, making the Trinity complete. Read that carefully, and we'll see you next time. But in the meantime, don't be disappointed you're not getting a mansion for your own. Be overjoyed that you're invited to the main house, that you're welcomed into the family to be in the presence of Jesus, to dwell forever in the presence of God. And that's much better by far. See you next time.